It is now 7:31 and I'm calling to order our meeting of the Light Plant Board on February 10th. We are meeting again on Zoom this morning per the governor's executive order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law issued in March of last year because of the coronavirus pandemic. This meeting is being recorded and will be available on Minuteman Media Network following the meeting at some point. If you have questions, please use the raise hand function. Please note that we will not be using the chat or the Q&A function in this meeting. When it's your time to ask a question, please turn your video on as it will help us put a name to your face. And if you've dialed in by phone this morning and would like to raise your hand, you can do this by pressing *9. And again, if you've dialed in this morning to unmute, you can press *6 and then *6 again to mute. And I think we are ready to begin. A few questions. I believe we have 2 sets of minutes available today to approve. There was a minor edits last night to, I believe, the November 25th version of the minutes, but they did not seem to be substantial and would not, I think we are able to approve both November 18th and November 25th. Is that correct? I guess I turn that question to the clerk for each of those meetings to say yes or no. Are we ready?
I got one more set of changes this last night that no one's seen. I
can you summarize them at all? Like, are they substantial?
No. Brian, do you think your changes were substantial?
No, this is for the 25th.
Yeah.
No, for the 18th.
18th.
Oh, for the 18th.
Yeah.
My changes were for the 18th.
If you'd like, I could go over them. I mean, there's probably 4. The beginning of the meeting, someone asked if the passcode could be embedded in the link for Zoom. And I just added that, Dave had given a response to that request saying that, for security, they prefer not to embed it in the link. So I just added that to the minutes. I think the votes, that's substantial. So let me get to that. There was a discussion on the ETS rate between Laura and myself that was not in the minutes that I added. I can share my screen if you want to see that. It's probably a paragraph. And then I changed the reasons I voted against some of the rates were written as learning purposes, and they were actually for the cost of service, the power cost adjustment was actually because I didn't receive the materials in advance, and the ETS was I felt that the distribution was not fully collected. So those are substantial changes that I made. Anything else is just grammar, little things.
And Brian, all that stuff was said in the meeting?
Correct. And I have timestamps. So if you want to go back in the edits and check.
So I'd like to get a sense of the board whether those are substantial enough changes that you'd like to review the minutes one more time, or with Brian's description, are you comfortable with approving the minutes as edited last night, even though we haven't seen all of them? Do you have an opinion?
My only comment is when there's a paragraph that gets added, I think I'd like to see them.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I know we want to get them approved, but I think we should see them.
Okay. So how about the meeting of November 25th? Do we have those available for approval?
So those are available. Let me just quickly, Brian added 2 comments to them, and I think they probably could be approved with these comments. I did send them this morning, but one was just a thank you to Laura to allow the board more time to review the rates that we reviewed on the 25th. And the second was a comment to encourage with Dave and Laura's support education on tour rates for the board. So I don't think they're substantial, and I would support approving those minutes with those minor changes.
Okay.
And going forward, I'm the clerk, so I won't be this late on getting my edits in the future.
Okay, so I think we can approve the minutes for November 24th. I think we'll review the November 18th minutes one more time so we can just see what the edited changes look like in context of the total set package of minutes. So do I have a motion to approve November 25th minutes?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Oh, I heard a second. I think it was Gordon. Was that Gordon? Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. And roll call. I'll go around my screen. Wendy,
Approve.
Gordon,
Approve.
Brian,
Approve?
Pam. I think that was an approved. And Alice, yes, approve. It looked like that's what your lip said. Okay, thank you. The minutes for November 25th are approved as edited from last evening. And we'll hold on November 18th so we can review the additions. We're on for the director's update.
Okay, thank you. We sent an e-newsletter to our customers in late January publicizing our EV programs. As a result, 75 customers used our Drive and Save wizard to create 125 online estimates of how much money and carbon they can save by driving a particular electric make and model instead of a comparable gasoline powered car. We also offered customers magnetic and static cling Concord Drives electric decals for their EVs, and 11 customers have asked for them so far. We'll also email the known EV drivers specifically with the decal offers in the next few weeks. I've been working with Kate Hanley on a grant application for 2 level 3 electric vehicle charging stations. That's a fast charging station. Looking for 2 of them. We're currently reviewing locations, and depending on the location, we'll either get 80% funding or 100% funding. If it's located on municipal property, funding would be 100%. So either way, this now makes it very attractive to finally get some fast charging stations in town. So we're pretty excited about that. The deadline for the grant application is March 19th. So we're working through that and we're in pretty good shape, but we still have, some work to do there. We have gotten pricing. So, that piece is done. Really the big piece for us now is the location and putting together an estimate, and we're working through those details. The annual report is now complete. I'll be sending that to Aaron Stevens this afternoon or tomorrow. So we got through that, which is good. We are in the recruitment process for a network engineer. You may recall that we planned to add a second network engineer a little over a year ago, but due to the pandemic, the recruitment was paused. Last week, we concluded second round interviews and are now checking references. So hopefully those check out. We're in the recruitment process also for a grade 1 line worker. We completed first round interviews and are in the process of scheduling second round interviews. So hopefully we'll get those wrapped up next week and be able to start checking references. Battery storage, as you all know, is a high priority for us. That has been paused a little bit just because all the stuff that we've been working on that's come up, but Laura and I are going to refocus on that in the next month or so and hopefully, bring a substantial update to the board. But that is a high priority for us. And I just wanted to, we haven't talked about it a little bit, so I wanted to kind of touch on it briefly. Another interesting project is 300 Baker Ave. The new owners have come to us and they're interested in making the building carbon neutral. You may be aware that that building is one of the 2 highest users in town. They're either first or second every year. They're interested in installing, a large solar array and a number of other initiatives. They've asked about our net metering cap, rebate storage, and a number of other things. We're going to continue the dialogue with them. And it's possible that we may have to review some policies and whatnot, but I just wanted to put that on the radar so that you're not surprised if we bring something to you guys in relation to that project. But it certainly is an interesting project that kind of aligns with the town initiatives. And it's, it's interesting how it aligns with our programs right now. So more to come on that, I would suspect, in the next meeting or two. And that's my update.
Any questions from members of the board?
Dave, it's Wendy. I have one. The battery storage was a pretty expensive investment. Do we think that we're going to have to go to town meeting for funding for that, or?
Well, that's the piece that, we're working through. Laura's put some
Okay.
numbers together already, and we need to review them. The question really comes down to, do we enter into a PPA with someone, or do we purchase it outright, and what makes the most sense? And what's the return on investment? And what's the savings in the capacity market and all that. So there's a lot of analysis behind it.
Okay.
And I don't have an answer for that just yet, but it is expensive.
Yep, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Brian? I think you might be on mute.
I'm muted.
Thank you.
So with 300 Baker Ave, it's wonderful that you're working with them and you're coming back to us with policy changes if you find any are needed. And that's very interesting, because I want to hear what you're hearing are things your customers would like to see that aren't currently, or what's prohibiting them from adopting these kinds of technologies and doing a zero carbon building or business, because that's the policy changes that need to happen. So I'm very excited to hear that you're doing that, and I'd love a report, even if they find no barriers. Just tell us how well it went.
Yeah, and that's the plan. I mean, we have to look at it from a number of different perspectives. Obviously we have the business that, we're running, and, if they go zero net, then, the board will have to think about, that revenue loss, it's going to have to be shifted over to all the other ratepayers. What are the options? Are there other ways to go about it that we can make it happen? So it's a challenging piece that we're looking at, but, like I said, it does align with the town goals for sustainability. So we're trying to figure out a path that makes sense.
Yeah, and that goes back to the revenue decoupling, and the volumetric part sales should be the volumetric pricing, and then operating the light plant. That's why we're raising fixed meter charges and things like that. So that's great.
Am I wrong? I thought that you originally presented this as the building will be all electric. That should offset the loss of revenue by having a carbon neutral if it's an all electric building.
Yeah, so, we're talking about a 3 megawatt solar array on the roof, canopy, all that. So you're really talking about a revenue drop significantly. And, anything that is over 50 kW, we currently require a battery because of our solar saturation. So there's a lot of pieces to it that we're looking at and working through. So, as I kind of referred to, policy and rate changes, there would have to be a change in the solar net metering rate to allow something that large. There's a whole bunch of pieces to it, but yeah, they are talking about upgrading the HVAC system and all of that. So there's a lot of pieces to it, but I think, it's definitely something that we're looking at very, very detailed, and once we get a little more information and understanding, we'll be back to you guys with the stuff that is applicable.
Okay. I'm hoping that you'll be able to send to the board a copy of the annual report submission to Aaron so that we can see it as well.
Yep.
Okay. And I had one question about the level 3 charging stations. It certainly is, it's enticing to want to put in a level 3 charging station on municipal property because it's 100% reimbursement. But is that the wisest place for us to be putting in a level 3 if they have to drive to the light plant or to Kai's Road or some other less than convenient place for somebody to access a level 3 charging station?
So I think, the big piece is access from Route 2, right? Because you pull up and it should be fairly close to that. So, is the light plant the best location? It's an option, but we're looking at other ones. And, You know,
I see a head.
Brian, stop shaking
Yeah.
your head and just listen to me for a second, please, because
Sure.
we have to build the infrastructure, and that's a primary issue, right? So we have to get power to the station. And we can all look and brainstorm and say, this location's the best or that location's the best, but it might not be feasible based on where the power is and the cost to get the power to the station. And so we're looking at that on a detailed level internally. And we're going to come up with location, but
Well, the reason I'm shaking my head is just I think of the long-term value of this charging location, and right now Concord, the section of Route 2 has like no CCS charging, so anything that goes in will get utilized. But when you're an EV owner, you're looking for stations that are near something you can do for 45 minutes while you do your rapid charging station. So, in the centers of town would be preferred because it does drive business to Concord, which is very important as well.
I agree with that. It would be ideal if we could get it in one of the business districts. But, I've talked to a lot of people, and many people that go to fast charging stations sit in the car. So, if we could get it in the business district so people could go do some shopping, great. But that's not going to be an easy accomplishment. And the additional cost to run the power there may make it not attractive. So, we're looking at a number of locations, and we're evaluating the distribution system and how that, that aligns with it. And that's going to drive a lot of the piece. If by chance it went into a private parking lot and we got 80%, the 20% cost still makes it attractive to do the project because it's not a lot different than doing type 2 level charging stations that we've already done. So we're going to move forward with the grant application, whether it's on municipal land or private land. We just have to determine what the most cost-effective solution is at this point.
You'll do a great job.
Thank you. Any other questions for the board? Gordon?
Yes,
I see your hand raised. Sorry, I didn't notice that at first.
going back to the idea that a 3 megawatt net metering application is kind of pushing it a bit in terms of its impact on our revenue. We have a conversation that's going to be taking place in 2021 about net metering as it applies to, or really won't apply to, tour. And so I'm wondering if maybe tour, that conversation as applied, and we've also ruled out tour as being inappropriate for businesses, but maybe in this instance it might be, because if they're going to be net zero anyway, then the exact details of the timing during the day won't really matter as much because they'll probably be generating their own power. So anyway, it's just an idea that maybe what we could do is, while we're trying to sort that out, we'd also try and fold it into the conversation we have to have anyway for solar plus tour.
Okay. We have a lot on our agenda for the coming year, and we get to talk about goals. We'll see how much we're trying to accomplish this year to see whether it's realistic. And this is certainly one of them, is understanding and making use of time of use rates. All right, I see no other hands raised at this point. Let's move on to the next agenda item, which is a discussion of the current status of the AMI consultant. When we last heard, we had gone out to bid for the consultant, and that we received a number of proposals. And so I think we're up to decision making. Let's hear from Dave or Laura.
Okay, Laura, do you want me to go through this? Do you want to go through it?
If you're comfortable, Dave, that's fine. If you want me and Carol to do it, that's also fine.
All right, I'll go through it. You guys jump in when you think it's appropriate. So, as I mentioned at the last meeting, we did receive the RFPs on January 7th. We went through the proposals. It was Laura, Carol, Joe, and myself. We got 6 proposals that were accepted. One was not because it was late. We got proposals from eSource, Lemmerhurt, Power Systems Engineering, SL Serco, Vast Solutions, Weston and Sampson. And since our last meeting, we went through the evaluations of the proposals, ranked them, and then opened up the price proposals. And out of those price proposals, we brought in the 3 highest ranked vendors. It was Lemmerhurt, PSE, and VAS. And they gave presentations. Obviously, we did it on Zoom. They didn't come into the office. And ultimately, Lemmerhurt was the front runner, and we were moving forward with the award process with them. So we've hit all our target dates so far. You know, last Friday was the date we were supposed to get notification out. We did. So we're staying on track. Their process, the consultant's process, once they get going, is pretty detailed. I think based on what they put in their proposals and their presentations, they're going to do a good job with customer engagement, working with the board, working with the staff. Really impressed. They have a lot of experience working with municipal light plants in the Northeast, which is helpful. So we're excited to be moving forward with this, but it's not going to be something that happens in a month or two, right? The timetable, I think their schedule was through the end of the year, if I'm not mistaken.
It was actually almost 50 weeks. So it could be as much as a year. You know, part of it depends. We don't know for sure, but I think just adding to what Dave said, we did not go with the cheapest offer. The company that we believe we're going to move forward with, and at this point, as we've said, we've announced to them that they're the front runner, and we're to spend the next roughly few weeks negotiating a contract with them. We anticipate a mid-March start. So once they get going in March, there's going to be a lot of work up front, as Dave said. They're going to do a lot of discovery, ask us, lists of questions about all kinds of things. But we have very good feedback from other Massachusetts and Northeast municipals about this firm. And actually, I'll also mention, I won't mention any names, but in calling around to other Massachusetts municipals, I did hear that one of the firms that sent in a proposal to us that was the least expensive, another Massachusetts municipal selected that company to do AMI. And I've heard through the consultant that we selected that they put very junior people on the project that don't know anything about AMI. So the company we've selected is extremely experienced, both technically and they have a person on staff who all the P&R for Florida Power and Light's roll out to millions of smart meter customers. So we're very excited to have this company going. They're going to start in March. We think it might take as much as a year, but hopefully a little less. And we do have a fallback. If for any reason we are unable to negotiate a contract with our front runner, which we have no reason to believe would happen, but in the event that that would happen, we do have our number 2 high scoring company on notice, but they would be next, for us to pursue a contract with. So we feel really good that we're in a good position to get this work done this year.
Great. Well, that's good progress. Any questions from the board?
What's the end product in a year? Is it selection of an installer or installed? I just want to be clear.
So this process is the consultant that's going to, put together the RFP for the purchase.
So in 1 year, we'll have an RFP for an AMI system?
Yes.
No, that's 1 year to actually get the vendor selected.
So to get a contract with the vendor to do the installation?
Yeah, within
Yes.
the year, they'll have the RFP for the AMI done. It'll be issued and awarded, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, Laura?
That's the anticipation. That's through the award. then there would still be the negotiation phase with this less, could be lengthy depending on the vendor chosen. But this 50-week timeline, getting the proposals back and making a selection.
So that would be a selection of the vendor by probably winter of 2022. Then our installation schedule would follow into 2023. Is that right? And I think that was in keeping with the original timeline that you presented to us, that 2023 would be the earliest for installation of AMI.
Yeah, and part of what they're going to look at is they're going to make a recommendation to us as well on whether we outsource the installation or do it internally. And that was well received on my end anyway, because, you know, having gone through a full meter deployment already, it is quite a job.
Mhm.
So we'll be interested to see what comes of that.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the board? Since we don't have the chat function available anymore, what I'd like to do is just see whether there's anyone who's attending in the audience who had a question. I know AMI has been one of those issues that citizens have been following quite closely for a while. So if there's anyone in the audience who'd like to ask a question, now's a good time to do that. Seeing no questions. Okay, great. We're ready to move on to the next discussion, which is the NYPA reimbursement, the rate, credit. I'm going to ask, I think it's Laura who's going to present this. She in our packet, we received a very detailed and well-written memo that helps us understand the NYPA project, the NYPA process, and ready to discuss it. Laura.
Thank you, Alice. I know that you have a lot of things to discuss during this meeting, so rather than just rehashing this memo, I think it might make more sense for me to ask, particularly some of the newer board members, if they had a chance to read through this memo, if they have any questions about what NYPA is. If you want me to go through that, or if you want to just move on to the where is the money level currently.
Would it be helpful if I shared the memo on the screen?
Yeah, I think so. Did everybody get a chance to read it?
Yes.
Yes.
Pam, how about you?
No, Matt, you're on mute, Pam.
I did not have a chance to read.
Okay, so maybe it makes sense to just try to quickly go through. So what NYPA is CMLP, and I won't go through the legal history, but just let it be known that CMLP has entitlement rights to a small percent of the hydropower that's produced through the Niagara project. The benefits of this power are administered through the Massachusetts Municipal Energy Cooperative, MWEC. And MWEC keeps track every month of the value of this power. The power is generally lower cost than other sources of power CMLP could purchase. So what happens is MWEC tells us, look, we just gave you power that was, this many dollars less than average market power prices. And so we keep that amount of money in a reserve account at CMLP. The reason we do that is because all of the savings by legislation from this hydro project have to go to residential customers. And through our policies, we distribute that credit by assigning $1 per kilowatt hour credit on customer bills for the first 75 kilowatt hours of residential customer use. So we need to constantly keep track of what is the value of the power we're receiving and how much have we already given to customers to make sure that the accounting of it is proper and that we are always passing the full value on to our residential customers. So Dave, if you would go to the page with the chart, I think it's one more down. What this chart shows is the blue bars are the amount of value per month that power is essentially cheaper than other market prices. And the red bars are how much we are giving to customers. So in the early part of this chart, back in January 2018, you can see the blue bars are bigger than the red bars. That means the savings have been larger than what we've been giving customers. The green line shows the balance that we keep in that reserve account that is due to ratepayers. So because we were giving them less than it was worth, the value in that balance account was growing. And that's what the green is. And the scale for the green line is on the right axis. So at the highest point, we were owing customers over $400,000 in NIPA value that we needed to give back. So starting in September of 18, we increased the NIPA credit, and then we increased it again in April or May of 19. And so since May of 19, you can see the red bars, what we're giving customers, was now larger than the blue bars. And when that happens, the cumulative account accrual balance due back to them is decreasing. So we've been giving that credit back at a larger rate than we were accruing it for quite some time. And the balance is getting to be lower now. And so this is only through December. And it does take some time to administrate this. I think we're proposing that the change that I'm about to suggest to you occur on March or April 1st, March 1st. So this chart does not account for, we still have January, February, March, where the funds will be drawn down further. So what I've done is I've looked at what the savings have been, those blue bars recently, and how we know capacity values are changing in the future, and estimated, just an estimate, what I think the credit might be worth for the balance of 2021. And based on that, I'm recommending that the NIPA credit, which is currently a nickel per kilowatt hour, be reduced to $0.015 effective March 1st. I believe if we do that, we will be balancing out the value of the NIPA power with the credit that we're giving customers to be roughly equal. And given the drawdowns we've already seen and what's going to happen in January, February, and March, I think this will put the account at about $80,000 balance by year's end. And it's ranged over history. I think you can see on page 2 of the memo, if you go up a page, Dave, there's some annual historical. If you look to the right, the ending balance in the account has ranged from a negative $35,000 in 2016 to the roughly almost $400,000 we saw at the end of 2018. So $80,000 is a reasonable amount, particularly given the uncertainty where we don't really know what the value of the NIPA credit is going to be. We're just estimating and forecasting. So I think $0.015 is a good estimate to put in for our future credit, and we'll need to continually monitor this and potentially rebalance it as things change.
Okay, thank you. I see a hand raised, Brian.
So this NIPA credit has been in existence for a very long time. And I know that we had made a change in the billing system where we had a lot of customers that were on bi-monthly billing that we have everybody on monthly billing. Is it feasible to have the monthly value change based on the NIPA information that we receive? And so that we don't have to do a fixed credit that stays, in place, but we just say whatever the delta value is that we need to send back to residents, we do that monthly, and we don't have to continually approve this or manage a balance.
It's a good question, but perhaps Dave and Laura can talk to this. It requires a board vote every time that we change the rate structure. And this is a request to change the current rate structure, not to have a fluctuating one that from month to month. So I'm going to leave that, let Dave answer, or Laura, just to make sure I understand that right.
Well, I want to clarify. So surcharges are a percentage, and they're a billing mechanism, and we don't have to approve every time they change. So it is possible.
Dave?
No, it's pretty specific on how we have to do this based on the guidelines that come out. We have to give back to the customers. And so we could do it monthly, but that's a lot of, that would be a vote every month from the board. That doesn't make a lot of sense from my end, from an administrative standpoint.
No, it doesn't.
And, doing it annually, doing the forecast has worked very well. We've been doing that for as long as we've had NIPA. And, I'm not one that fears change, but in this particular case, I think the process that's laid out is the right process.
Okay.
Okay. Pam,
I just want to clarify that this is basically non-controversial, that this is a reporting that we're enjoying from Dave and Laura, and we need to approve it periodically, but is there anything controversial in this? It seems like an administrative thing driven largely by rather complicated underpinnings procedurally or from, government sources. So I just want to get my sea legs on this. It sounds to me like this is like something that is non-controversial that we need to understand minimally so that we can vote on it occasionally. Is that right?
Yeah, this is a housekeeping item.
Okay, yeah, there you go. That's it. That's it. That's very well put. This is a housekeeping item, right?
Yeah, and the only thing that I would add to it, I mean, we do want you guys to vote on it today. All the MLPs get together with MWEC. We're required to annually to have a meeting to discuss this and any changes that come. I'm the chair of that committee. We didn't meet this past year. We're going to do it virtually because of the pandemic. So many times when we vote on this, I might have an update about new things. And years ago, I brought up another part of NIPA that, we were going to look at. I don't have any additional stuff to report at this time because we haven't met, but we're going to be doing that in June, and I might have more information then. But this particular piece of it is the housekeeping piece.
Thank you. Thanks.
I see no other hands from the board. I have only one question. We have fluctuated wildly, as you pointed out, Laura, from 2018 or before in the amount that we have in that account. Does that require any action for the board to consider whether we want to set a policy guideline about how much we want to keep in reserve, or let the markets determine and review each year for a reimbursement to customers?
I think it's a good idea to have, a threshold set, whether it be, 50,000, 100,000, what we think is appropriate, not to go below. One of the things that may happen if you do that is it may require additional votes throughout the year to adjust the rate if we get close to that threshold, which is okay, but it's just something that you want to keep in mind when you set the threshold if you were to do that.
Laura, can you unmute? Sorry.
All right.
Okay.
I was going to say, I think a target would be a fine thing to have. I would prefer it to be labeled and understood as a target rather than a threshold, only because we are chasing our tail on this. It's reported after the fact, transfer for November yet. And so we're always chasing our tail, and it's difficult to actually exactly hit it. So if we were to phrase it as a target, I think that would be great, rather than it has to be, a certain amount, because that might be difficult to do.
Okay. So it sounds like that's something we can discuss at a future meeting to decide what that target realistically could be that doesn't impede your ability to offer the credits when they're available, and not to require a monthly vote from the board to change rates to adjust to it. That sound right? Okay, we'll put it on a to-do agenda. Are there other questions from the board regarding NIPA? And again, I'm just going to ask whether there's anyone in the audience who would like to ask a question regarding NIPA. You can raise your hand if you have a question. All right, seeing none, let's move on. We're doing great this morning, guys. Oh,
Alice,
Wendy,
don't we have to vote?
we do have to vote, you're right.
So can I make a motion that
Yeah,
we
thank
adopt the
you.
recommendation in Laura's memo to reduce the microcredit from 5 cents to a penny and a half, effective March 1st?
Second,
I have a second from Brian. It's a roll call vote, please. I'll go around my screen. Gordon. I think that was I. Wendy.
Aye.
Brian.
aye.
Pam.
I,
Alice. I. Unanimous vote support of the change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, our next, thank you for getting me back on track, Wendy. Our next discussion is about the customer opt-out policies that are available. We were given a draft of both an opt-out policy and the form to be completed if a customer chooses to opt out of a smart meter. So I guess we can, the policy requires a vote of the board. So I want to make sure that we all feel comfortable with the policy that's presented. I know that I had sent some comments to Dave, most of you haven't seen, but it's more wordsmithing than anything else. Let's discuss let's start with the policy itself. Do you have a copy of that on your screen, everyone, or do you want it to be placed up on the screen?
I think for the video, we should place it on the screen.
All righty.
And then Alice, does this include updates? Maybe Dave can speak to the comments that we received.
This is just the version that I sent to the board without comments. We can add the comments in as we go, but I thought it was probably the right idea to put what we recommended to the board first.
Okay.
With the understanding that it is likely going to have additions or changes to it.
Okay, so let's just go. This is basically a policy recommendation for how it basically allows the opt-out of a smart meter should a customer want to do that. And there's some provisions that go with it. Do you want to walk us through so that people in the audience who may not have seen the policy options are brought up to speed on that, David?
Sure. So one of the things that, we know we're looking at doing some form of smart meter technology moving forward. And we have some smart meters now and some radio reads. And, as everyone knows, we've heard from some citizens that would rather have an analog meter. And so to that point, we put together this policy. So it would apply to radio read meters or smart meters. So a customer could opt out of that at any time. And we created a form that they'd have to complete. So I can share that after. But essentially, if they opt out of the smart meter or radio meter, they would have a manual read fee of $20 per month. And there would be a one-time charge for the removal or installation fee of $75. That's essentially what's in the policy right now. I will note that the installation removal fee does not fully cover the cost to do that work. But I thought we needed to do something to recover it. It's an expense that we wouldn't have otherwise. And then the $20 per month read fee, that also doesn't cover the truck roll. But I figured we'd try and recoup some of the expense. And I did look at a couple other MLPs that have these, and it's very similar. But I know some of you have done a little bit more research, and there's a wide range of what could be done here. So this is a starting point for us for discussion.
So let me ask you a question. The $75 fee that would be charged to remove an already installed AMI meter, that does not include a new meter cost, right? Putting in an analog. Say somebody has a smart meter, wants to take it off their house and go back to an analog. It doesn't include the cost of the new meter being installed. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so this is just the charge for installation, for taking out the old meter and putting in a new one, not the cost of the meter.
It's a portion of the removal and installation fee. It's
Yeah, a portion of.
the cost of the analog meter that we purchased.
So, sorry, to follow up on that question, the $75 is it's not the cost of the meter, but it's the service of installation of the analog and removal of the other meter. If you were to charge that at an appropriate amount without the costs of the meter, what would that number be? How much higher than 75 do you think it would be?
It would probably be closer to 100.
I have the same question on the $20. I mean, how much more would it be if you covered your costs?
So that's a little bit more difficult to answer, only because it depends on the number of customers that decide to opt out. If it were one customer that opted out and only one, it would be closer to that $75 to $100 to read one meter. But if it's a group of them, then that number is going to come down because we're probably going to group that in its own meter reading cycle. So you'll get some efficiency there, but it's still going to be higher than $20. Alice, do you want me to put the form up as well?
Yeah, I just want to make sure we all have our questions answered on this particular aspect.
Gordon had a question.
Oh, sorry, I can see it. Thank you for helping on that one. Yep, Gordon. I think you need to unmute first.
I
Thank
think
you.
he's trying.
There. Oh, I went back to mute, unfortunately. I know you were unmuted for a second, but it popped back.
Okay, yeah,
Thank you.
sorry. I have a question about the terminology. It says automatic meter reading or advanced meter reader infrastructure. And then also today, there were two other terms that were used, smart meter and radio read. And I'm wondering if do either of those two acronyms, AMR, AMI, correspond to radio read or smart meter? Are they all kind of synonymous? Or what I'm looking for is just an understanding of what the terminology is that this policy is covering.
So AMR is the radio read meters that we currently have. AMI is the smart meter technology, which could be a number of different solutions.
Could we put into the policy AMR, EG, radio read? That would have been helpful to me because I have some idea, because I think that like I have had I have solar, so that means I have a smart meter, right?
Mhm.
But before I had solar, I think I had radio read, meaning, well, actually, meaning it was sufficient to have a truck roll down the street and it was able to remotely pull the meter data, right?
Yeah, that's AMR.
Okay, and
So-
so really we're talking about three possible kinds of meters now under this policy, right? The third one being the analog meter.
Yeah, yes, but I would clarify that three different technologies, right? Because you have the radio read meters, you would have analog meters, and then you would have some form of smart meters, which would fall in the AMI category. And there's a number of different technologies out there that we'll be looking at. So,
Okay.
With whatever's selected, when we get to that point, that's down the road a little bit, as we talked about, it could be a wired solution, it could be a combination, it could be a mesh network. There's a bunch of different solutions that we may have, and we might have a combination of the.
So you're saying that it wouldn't really be possible to define these terms for the reader?
I think the way they're defined in the policy is the way they are in the industry.
Okay, all right. Well, I guess it doesn't matter as long as it's clear what the policy means. Just wasn't clear to me reading it. I didn't, anyway, that's enough on that.
Well,
So-
actually, that does raise a good point. I mean, there needs to be a plain English way of understanding this stuff, right? And I don't know enough about the background or what actually goes out to customers, but if it's apparent that even light board members are a little bit, I mean, this is probably old terrain that you guys have gone over for years, but there is a plain English issue always when you're administering things that have technical components, but people need to understand in plain English. So I just make the general observation that to the extent that we're showing that stuff is going to the public, we need to be sure that we can put things in plain English, right? I mean,
So
this,
my,
this probably wouldn't go, I don't know, what are we planning to do with this policy?
I look at this as an internal policy to guide the decisions made by the light plant. So
Okay.
it's an act of a board giving direction to the light plant on the direction we want to see them go on installing non-AMI meters for those who want it.
All right.
Not as a public, I mean, it's available to the public as are all of our documents.
Thanks.
It's also
Just-
acknowledging that we're going to support this, right?
Right.
Because we haven't said we're going to do that to date.
I think it would be helpful on the form
All right, wait, so we're moving to the form, so we should all be on the same page. Are we done talking about the content of the policy?
No, I have a question I've been waiting for, but I figured I'd add it to this conversation because it's in line with what we're talking about. Because what goes to the customer is the form, and the plain English should be on the form, which is that it is a non-wireless communicating meter. And that's the plain English that people are looking for in adopting this. So, you know, if opt out of radio read and AMI infrastructure doesn't translate to people understanding that opt out means I don't want wireless technology, then let's state that this form is to have wireless technology on my property.
The only thing I would say, Brian, to that is what about the option of a wired smart meter? What if that's a solution that we come up with?
You're still having no wireless devices because it would be a wired. It would either be the analog where they walk up, or it would be the wired where it communicates. But it's to opt out of the wireless technology because that's what people were asking for.
Right. So do you have any suggested language change on the form then?
No, because I'm bad at spitballing language for a form, but I would just put a subtitle to the very top of the form saying, you know, something to that effect of no, you know, I desire no wireless technology from the light plant on my property. It's far from the best language, but
No, I think that we'll work on that language. That's probably not the best option, but we understand what you're trying to get at in that policy.
well, I raised my hand earlier for a question about the fees.
Mhm.
So the $20 fee, you said that could be if there's like a single person on this opt-out, that could be as high as $100 a month to send that one person out to that one customer. But when you scale up, that cost goes down because that one role could cover more customers, thus the cost of that is spread. The $20 covers about how many people opting out to be fair collection for the cost of rolling that truck?
So I didn't do the analysis on that, Brian, in that way. What I did was I just looked at what some other people had done and used that as a guide. And it is pretty spread on what people are doing with that particular monthly fee, depending on where you are. And I thought I heard the board say, excuse me, at the last meeting that we talked about this, that there should be something, but it shouldn't be enormous, but there should be an additional fee. So I figured go on the lower end rather than the higher end, and that's kind of how I structured that.
Okay. And I just, one other question, which is to clarify that the meter charge of $16 in the existing rates, this would be an additional fee to that. This would not be a replacement of that fee.
This was going to be, in my mind, a replacement, but I didn't think about it in that regard either. So that's a good point.
Yeah, because we're raising the meter charge so that we can fund distribution in more of a fixed manner.
Yeah.
And this, if they opt for this policy, they'd be opting out of managing all the wires and poles in the distribution system and the salaries and trucks.
So you're suggesting that this be in addition to the normal charge?
Correct.
And I think that's appropriate if we're going to try and recover some of the expense that we're going to incur.
So it would be, without it being additional, it would be just $4 extra. And with being additional, it would be,
It would be $20 extra is
yeah, which, I mean, it would only have been $4 extra, is that right? If
if it
had-
was
if it
to
had been additive.
yeah, if it was to replace the existing charge, this would be a $4 increase. But what we're looking at here is adding this in addition to the normal distribution charge of $16 a month.
So the more you want, I guess the objective is to give people an incentive to go to the wireless approach. So the more cost is fair cost that reflects the actual cost of retaining the old-fashioned way is the better way to go, it would seem to me. If you want to give incentives to go to smart meters, which is an inevitable outcome at some point. It's inevitable, right? I mean, this is the way the world is going. So I would say you want to fairly be able to defend a fairly aggressive add-on that reflects the real costs for remaining in an antiquated system. Is that
Yeah.
right? Wrong? Am I missing something?
So
I'm-
who's that? I didn't see who was about to ask a question.
Yeah, it was Wendy. I was just
Wendy.
agreeing with Pam, and I think we should do our best to cover cost, but
Yeah.
the $20 fee, I guess my only question on that one was, Dave, is where is that in the range of what you benchmarked? Is it high or low or on
It's
the
low.
lower end?
It's on the lower end.
I'm still okay with that. I think, this is a very controversial, but we're trying to accommodate customer needs, and we can evaluate it over time. If the costs end up being a lot higher, then, we should reevaluate it in a year from now.
Yeah, I think the adoption of this rate, when we go back, $20 is fine for now, and then at the end of the year, when we see how many people are adopting this rate and how many reads that truck roll is actually doing, we can adjust this $20 to reflect cost.
So I just have one. Oh, I'll let Gordon go and then I'll add my question.
We're kind of grouping the radio read and the smart meters together as something that would be equally undesirable to the people that adhere to this anti-smart meter belief. But I don't know that that's actually true. And I've heard complaints about that are specific to the smart meters that suggest to me that some portion of that population may be happy to stay with basically what they've got. And it's the move to this new technology with the finer grained billing, the monitoring, the privacy issues, and the very large number of transmissions during the day. So I mean, I don't know what they think, but there could be advantages to us that if they are not willing to, even if they're not willing to accept a smart meter, that if they're willing to stay with the kind of meters that we have today, that would be a big advantage to us, because the truck roll would just be a truck roll. It wouldn't be a truck roll, park, guy gets out of the car, measures it, gets back into the car and goes to the next site.
I think that, this, I believe the concern is mainly the wireless technology, but if it is the privacy, the radio read still provides plenty of data. So I don't want this to become select your own meter and have, customers saying, I want, a fully integrated AMI smart meter, or I want a radio read meter, or I want an analog meter. I'd rather we address the original concern, which was the wireless technology, in this rate and leave it at that. If we see really high adoption with this rate, then we should really investigate if we can get more people onto radio reads, because it's not a wireless concern. It's a technology, it's a data concern.
So, excuse me. So I think in terms of adoption rate, it's going to be very low.
I would suspect.
You know, going through the RFP consultant, they've dealt with this, you know, quite a bit, and they went through some of the adoption rates, you know, in the Northeast, and it's really low. So we're going to get some of it, but I don't think it's going to be a high volume.
So I have two questions about the rates that we'd be charging. So when we've looked at the cost of whether we're changing our rates to be able to purchase more RECs, we look at incremental costs to the user being de minimis in the total bill. You know, a quarter of a penny or a half a penny amounts to some very small amount of change in a customer's bill. In this case, I want to make sure that we're not being punitive, which I think would put us in some shaky ground for how we establish a rate that is equitable, and that we're asking people who choose to keep the meter that's currently on their house in some situations, or have it removed so that they can go back to one that they had on their house, and asking them to pay an additional $240 a year plus $75 for the installation. So that's an ongoing $240 a year that we're asking them to pay. And I personally feel that that's a fairly significant cost. And I want to make sure that that's not punitive in the way it was designed. And I don't know about incentivizing as the outcome of what we want to do in terms of having people move to smart meters. I think this is a transition phase. You're right that we will all be going to smart meters at some point, and there'll be some people who choose not to. So I just caution us about establishing a rate that is fairly significant. I did look, I think I think Laura sent around an article about the rate structure, and that does vary widely across the country. And I know Dave looked at some similar MOPs in Massachusetts in establishing this rate. And this is somewhere within the range, maybe the upper end of that range, but it's within a range. But it is not an insignificant cost. So I just want to recognize that and put that out there for folks. Pam.
I just want to clarify my comment. I think it is the main objective, in my judgment, is to make sure that the fee structure reflects the additional burden that the town suffers because someone is doing something that is essentially offline and essentially antiquated, and also not particularly helpful in terms of our long-term climate and other goals. So I perhaps should not have said create an incentive. I think mostly we want to make, I would want an accurate reflection that we can justify and document of the burden that this is putting on the town. So it doesn't have to be an incentive, although I think in essence it should be in a way, but I think we should be asking people to pay what it costs. Especially given the fact that what it's doing is inevitable and helpful.
And I think this rate is not punitive in the fact that, the questions that Pam and I asked, which were, the $75 fee, what does it really cost? The estimate was $100. So that isn't punitive. That's under collection of an expense. We also asked the same question about the $20 fee. And he said, if there's low uptake, that could be as high as a cost of $75 to $100. So I think $20 is fair. And if not fair, I think it's definitely not punitive, if not subsidized. So I would say, let's start with the $20 and in a year, see what the adoption rate is of this policy, and then reevaluate that $20 based on the cost of that truck roll. I think that $20 should be linked to the number of customers and the cost to send the guy out to read the meters, and that's it. I mean, the meter fee will collect all the other parts of the rate for distribution. So
Alice, are you suggesting, what are you suggesting?
I was just I wasn't offering a suggestion, I was giving my opinion that it felt like it was a considerable amount of money that we're asking people who choose to opt out of smart meters.
So you're
Um,
focusing on the additive $20.
Yeah,
Which in the aggregate over a year will be close to the 245 or plus 75.
and
Okay,
it's not a one-time fee, it's it's a monthly fee.
I see what you're saying. I just want clarification.
Yep, Gordon.
I kind of agree with Pamela, and I've had this view, I think, of this request from this subset of the Concord community that, look, I'll put it this way. The light plant is a small organization, fighting costs all the time in order to, and we've been successful in bringing a really high quality service at a very competitive price. But those prices are driven by the costs, which are driven by the number of things that we ask our light plant staff to do. And this is just increasing the complexity of operating light plant. That's going to increase the prices, our costs over time. So I think as an open community, Concord is inclined to respect the wishes of this this small group, but these are the kinds of things that add up over time, and they're going to continually increase the cost of operations.
Could we simply be explicit and say, this reflects the actual cost. We don't want to subsidize people. And we'll as Brian was suggesting, and that we'll re-examine in a year. Just tell it like it is.
Other comments from the board? Okay. And we knew this was going to be a complicated conversation. We've had this at several different meetings, and we've certainly heard, we had an entire public forum a couple of years ago on just this issue. So I'd like to open this to questions from the audience, because I'm sure there are people, I see a couple of hands raised. Let's hear what the comments are from the audience, and we'll come back and talk a little bit and then come to a vote. David Allen.
There, we got unmuted. At this point, really a footnote on this terminology, incentivizing. I think the history really is clear. The topic here is not encouraging people to do thus or encouraging people not to do thus. This is a deeply held view by the folks who feel this. I happen to disagree with it quite directly, but I think it's crucial for us as a community to be quite clear that it's their deeply held view that they're acting on, and we would be remiss, frankly, if we were seen as using price mechanisms to push them in one direction or another. That's already been discussed here. Is this punitive, for example? And just incidentally, what Dave is saying is that this will be a subsidized charge. In other words, yes, they are being subsidized a little bit, and I don't think that's amiss, considering, as Alice has pointed out, it's already going to be a large number. Thanks.
Thank you. Ray Andrews has his hand raised.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes, you mentioned that removing the old meter, whatever's in there now, and replacing it with a smart meter. I'm sorry, moving the meters in there now and replacing it with an analog meter would have a cost to remove it. Is there a cost to add the new analog meter? I think there is. Is that correct? And since you can't have a house without a meter at all, why don't you just have a fee that says removing the offending meter and putting in the analog meter is one cost rather than two? Is my question clear?
I think you're asking whether we, instead of having a monthly charge, you include the monthly charge in the.
No. It's just the removal is the one-time $75. I thought I understood that it's $75 to remove the more intelligent meter, whatever it is in there now, the radio meter, whatever. And people who want the analog meter would have to pay to have the more modern meter removed and have the analog meter installed, but that the actual analog meter installed would be more in addition to the 75. Is that correct?
No.
So the way it's written up is that it's a removal / install fee.
Okay. That's okay.
So basically we'd have someone go out, remove the meter and put the new one in. That's all included in that $75.
Okay. That's my question.
The cost of the analog meter is not included in that.
Okay. That's okay. I misunderstood. Thank you. I'm all set.
Yep.
Thank you. Terry Ackerman has her hand raised, member of the select board.
Hi, hi, Terry Ackerman. I'm speaking as an individual, not for the select board. My question is slightly off topic, but just basically, what are the advantages of the smart meter? What will customers be able to do with smart meters that we can't do now?
Dave or Laura?
Well,
You
you can
want me to
get,
take that, Dave, or?
sure, go ahead. I'll add in.
Okay, so thanks, Terry, for your question. It's a great question. There are a couple, the benefits emanate from a couple different sources. One are benefits to the customer in terms of information about their energy use. It's true that CMLP will be able to see how much electricity a customer is using at each hour of the day, but we plan to post that information out to customers' personal accounts so that you could yourself look up and see what does my electricity use look like. And at the same time, particularly as we roll out time of use, that will help you understand what is the cost of my electric use and how can I change my behavior to lower those costs. So there's an informational benefit to the customers. There's also a benefit to reliability in situational awareness, because the meters will be able to communicate back to our distribution system and tell us, for example, when they go out, so that we could know, let's say a customer is not even home. We could know that their electricity is out and start a truck roll and restore their service before they even figure out that they've lost power. The way it is today, we have to wait until somebody actually calls us and says, hey, my power's out, before we can even begin to mount, restoration efforts. So there's also some benefits to the distribution system in terms of right sizing the distribution system. Right now, we kind of oversize the equipment that's out there because we're not really sure exactly how much each customer is using. But if we could see exactly how much everyone uses, we could right size the equipment and make it smaller and less costly than it is today. So there are a number of benefits, both directly to the customer in terms of knowledge and cost information, as well as benefits to the overall system, which improve our reliability and service to the customer.
Thank you, Laura.
Okay. So just to follow up, so from the customer point of view, for example, we just put in the mini splits, and we're trying to figure out what temperature to keep each room at, and we're having a lot of issues with all that, and our electric bill quadrupled last month. And we know that we're not doing it the most efficient way. So if we had a smart meter, maybe we'd be able to have better data to fine tune, the rooms we're not using, we can turn down to 61 and that kind of thing. And we not be able to have that better data about that from the smart meter.
So the smart meter granularity, Terry, is at the meter, not downstream of the meter. So it's the point of measurement where CMLP drops the electricity off to your house. A smart meter will not be able to tell you how much your heat pumps are using versus how much your light bulbs are using. Like once you get downstream of the meter, it doesn't have visibility, if you will, of your individual device usage. What it can tell you is overall how much your whole house is using by hour.
Okay, that would be much better than what we have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Carlin Reed.
Hi, folks. Carlin Reed, 83 Wits End. This has been a very interesting discussion, and I've been looking forward to it. A couple of points. I support the light board's approach and this policy. I think that it is useful and necessary to keep the light plant going, as well as to provide the advanced information that the smart meter offers. I can also see that the key to its success is going to be communicating the need and the considerations for this approach, the need to change and the need to charge. The discussion we've had already today provides that kind of background for the communications effort that will be necessary to make this a success. Now, one question I have is, am I correct that this would take effect on March 1 of this year if you vote today?
That is, that's what I have on the draft policy, March 1. So it would be in effect. The one thing that we still have to do, and we haven't done yet because we don't have a policy, is we'd have to acquire the meters and that sort of thing. So could we put someone on March 1st? I don't know the answer to that yet. The policy would be in place on March 1st.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to getting my smart meter.
Thank you, Carlin. I think I do not see any other hands. Ray Andrews had it up, but I think maybe that answered his question. Any other questions before I move back to the board for a vote?
If I may, I just want to clarify that largely the issue that is being presented by the people who don't want them is a sense of the science that is contrary to the sense of the science that we have. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a good
That's correct.
assessment.
Okay. I think it's important to, I mean, I don't want to go to 30,000 feet here, but just as a statement of, if you extract principles from this, one principle you extract is, from my point of view, and I think it really is not about, I'm sorry I use the word incentivize, but it is about, in terms of the financing, the fair description of the additional cost, I think is what we're looking for. But I think at 30,000 feet, we're also talking about the collective good, the community good, that on balance, in my judgment, if you're making that assessment, goes in the direction of smart meters. And the second is science. And that on balance, what we're saying is that although there may be differences of opinion, as there will be everywhere when it comes to science, which is by definition interested in that, we are seeing this from the point of view of science as going in the direction of the smart meter, as from in terms of its impacts on people's health, et cetera. I just want to make those 2 points: science and community good.
Thank you. I think that captures the concerns. Wendy.
Just one quick comment. So the only thing I would add is that there are, for some constituents, privacy and security is a concern. It's not just science, but I also think our AMI RFP will address those concerns when we ultimately implement our smart meters. So, but I certainly concur with Pam's assessment as well.
Thank you. There are 2 more hands that have gone up from the audience. Let's take those 2, and then we'll come back to the board for a vote on the policy. Courtney Whalen.
Good morning, everybody. Courtney Whalen, 65 Dover Street. I just want to again thank the board and David especially for taking up this issue and working on the policy. I just do have a comment. I mean, I know there's obviously costs involved. I feel like the $20 seems a little excessive. And I mean, that over the course of the year is an extra $220. I mean, it's not cost limiting for everybody, but I do think it obviously disincentivizes people who would, you know, coming up with that extra money. You know, they would definitely, even if they wanted one, you know, that's extra money. I know in Concord, doesn't really seem like tons of money, but I do think that there's people around. Just seems a little unfair given that, you know, the board and CMLP would, you know, has the money to kind of do this AMI plan that they want to implement and then disincentivize anybody who doesn't, is not really on board with that. So that's just that one comment. But I wanted to know if anybody knows what the exact energy use of running these AMI meters are. I mean, obviously wireless is using an energy, you know, some form of energy to communicate between these wireless devices. And I mean, wireless does utilize more energy than hardwired. Sorry, have a little bit of an allergy here. And I just want to know if you guys know what is that energy used of the AMI versus having the hardwired devices, if anybody knows that. And then also, how many times a day are these AMI meters going to be communicating? Is there something in that policy, that AMI policy, that says, okay, it's only going to communicate 4 times a day? Or is it going to be, you know, there's been other issues with other communities where they said, yeah, it's going to be 4 to 6 times a day. And then it was thousands of times a day that they were sending signals. So I didn't know what sort of information you guys had on how many times you guys were going to be collecting data on people every day. Because I do know, health issues aside, that there are people who are, again, and I know you guys addressed this, the privacy and the security issues, that seems like a lot of information gathering. And then, oh, just one last question for David. I know you said the policy will be implemented on the 1st of March, but was just wondering how long you thought maybe it might take for the you to find and get those analog meters, and you know, if you had a better sense of how much longer we would have to wait if we chose to get onto this opt-out policy. Thank you.
It's really going to come down to lead times, and you know, I'll start looking at that now once this meeting's done. So I really can't answer that at this point, but you know, it all depends on how available the analog meters are. So I will keep you informed, Courtney. I know you've been very interested in this from the beginning. So when I know more information, I will certainly send you an email.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And do you guys have any idea of how much energy the wireless versus hardwired utilizes? Does anybody have any information on that energy use of wireless?
We do not at this time.
And if I might just add to that, David, Courtney, these are, I think, yet undetermined, in part based upon the type of system we ultimately select. We're fairly open-ended on the RFP for the AMI consultant, that we wanted to consider multiple technologies. And I believe each technology would have its own energy use profile. So that's something I think that will be taken into consideration when selecting a system. Moreover, your question about the frequency of transmissions, that is also something that is yet undetermined and something that will be considered when we go through the process of identifying what services and systems are out there and what makes the most sense for Concord. So more to come on that. Nothing's determined up front.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Last question from the audience is Gail Heyer.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to say, thanks to Wendy for mentioning the privacy and security. That's a really huge thing for me. I am just really uncomfortable with the town knowing how much I'm spending on my electricity on a daily, hourly basis. That just makes me really uncomfortable. And then I would disagree about the science. I think it's developing, and I think that we really can't say what's known about the impacts of wireless technology. The FCC has been sued about its standards for measuring the effects of the safety of wireless radiation, and there's a lawsuit pending at the federal level. And I listened to the arguments, and the judges were very sympathetic to the 11,000 pages of data from the folks who want the FCC to take a closer look at this than they've done since 1996. That's what they're following, is, you know, wireless phone safety data since the 90s. So I think this is a developing area of science. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's go back to the board. We've talked about this now for a good half hour, so I think we are, if the board has any other further discussion, we should do that now and then take a vote. I want us to just acknowledge one aspect of establishing a policy now. We have on file probably requests from maybe 4 or 5 individuals who would like to see the meter installed now. We know that things are likely to change as we go forward and we learn more about what the available technologies are, whether we go for wireless, whether we have hardwired options. The options that we'd be looking at for now are what's currently available in a non-radio feed, non-AMI realm, so an analog type meter. And at some point, as technology changes, we may come back to this policy and look at the other options of what we can offer as equitable choice for our customers. So the question, this really addresses the immediate request that we have from a number of residents who have asked for a non-AMI meter currently. Okay, is there any further discussion from the board, or are we ready for a vote? And if we're ready for a vote, do I have a motion? Gordon, I think if you could unmute, please.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
the reminder. Maybe we don't need to clarify this because everybody knows what the specific technologies we're talking about at this moment, but the controversy is about wireless, and the term wireless doesn't appear in the policy. So it really what it is, so maybe it doesn't matter because it's clear to everybody what we're talking about here, but what people are, I think what the public is asking to be able to uninstall are wireless AMR and wireless AMI. Now, the reason why I'm making the distinction is because the high frequency, high resolution billing is not actually a wireless concept per se. And so anyway, I guess as long as people understand what we're talking about, I think that generally speaking, people are asking for wireless AMR and wireless AMI meters to be uninstalled. And if as long as that's clear, then I'm fine.
Okay. Any other comments or question before? Okay. Do I have a motion? With that caveat of understanding that people know what's on the table for replacement meter. Wendy.
So I make a motion to adopt the policy as written with the modification of wireless in the customer form to help with clarification.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Brian seconds. Roll call vote. I'll go around my screen in order that I see you. Brian.
Aye.
Pam.
Aye.
Wendy.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Alice. Aye. Unanimous vote of the board to adopt the policy with some modifications to language as discussed in today's meeting. Okay, excellent. Thank you all. Let's
Now
move on.
that we've done that, I just want to make sure, is this, the $20 is additive, right?
Additive. It is a fee that will be charged monthly for the cost of.
Additive, it's on top of the.
Yes.
It's not okay, just want to make sure. It's not a $4 increment, it's a 36, whatever.
Right. The policy reads as a specific meter fee,
Okay.
right? Separate and apart from the monthly.
Okay, got it.
It's not a meter fee, it's a manual read fee.
Okay, good.
The cost of doing business fee. What it costs the light plant to implement it.
No.
Not cost, the actual cost, right?
Yep. Okay, our next discussion is about the board goals. We have, I have received a number of comments over the course of the last month that put together a draft of goals for the board. And now's our opportunity to kind of hash those out. I tried to include everything that I had received so that I've captured the key interest from each of the board members of what we hope to accomplish as a board this year. Late yesterday, or I got to it late yesterday, we received some additional comments that perhaps as we get to each, we can have the person who feels strongly about them just offer their opinion about why they're included. So one of the things for the audience to understand is that as we wrote our boards, I wrote our goals, I did a crosswalk back to the select board goal framework so that I can see where, or all of us can see where our goals for the light plant and the light board itself are aligned with the community goals, the bigger goals, governance, public health and safety, financial stability, and did a crosswalk back to see if we were aligning with the general goals of the select board. And you'll see that in the version that you should have all seen that under the goal statement underneath each of the goals that we have included. So there are some big questions that were not addressed in the goals that we have. Some of the comments were granular in nature and went outside a goal statement. I thought it went outside of our general goal statement into the questions that we would ask in order to meet the goals. So many of these items in our goals will require a meeting to discuss, or maybe more meetings, to discuss our implementation strategy for these. But we are mindful that the board's role here is to guide the light plant in policy and decision-making for them to be able to do the work that's within the framework of the light plant. Our job here is to ask the right questions that help us to get to where we want to be on implementation of each of these. We are not, as we did not write the AMI draft RFP, we would not be writing the documents that would follow in here, but we have chosen that key objectives for the next year is probably a short term, and I think Wendy aptly presented that thought that these are actually not going to be a one-year goal, that these are multiple year goals because it's already partially into the year. So I'd like to begin with just, if you could pull up your copy. I will take additional notes, but key among our goals is there are a number of people who asked that we include an item on budgeting, that we ensure fiscal accountability. And it's a question, a number of people asked questions about the risk of our financial standing. And I think that upon discussion and further thought, I think that is addressed with a comment that we are accounting for inherent risk in market fluctuations. And I think and I'm seeing, yes, that I captured that correctly. Okay. So our first goal is to make sure that we have a budget that reflects our true costs and the market fluctuations are understood. We talked about the need, and I think we are all in agreement that a goal is to update the strategic plan. And again, this is a reminder that the strategic plan is not the board's responsibility to write the plan, but to offer suggestions of areas that should be updated to go into the strategic plan. And we started by offering alternative versions of what that goal or vision statement at the front of it is. And I think everyone was fairly aligned. We went back and forth on the language, and I will send it back out after the meeting, but it basically is an understanding that, here I'll read what our current version says. Together with our customers and partners, CMLP will help build a stronger, more vital community by providing safe, reliable electricity and broadband services at a fair cost, while actively working to achieve Concord's climate, sustainability, and resilience goals. I think that captured all the comments that I had received from you. And I'll send this back out at the end of the meeting. So there were some additional comments that I had received about questions that some members wanted to see addressed in the strategic plan. I don't think those individual discussions should be happening as a goal statement, but as we discuss whoops, my phone, unfortunately, the dog had surgery yesterday and that was the vet calling, sorry. So rather than go through each of the individual discussion items under the strategic plan, the goal of the light board is that working with the light plant, the strategic plan will be updated now that it's multiple years out. And we had decided in the beginning it was an iterative process. We're up to that point of revising it again to meet our current goals. And the next big goal that we had, and these may not be in order, is to revise the CMLP renewable power supply section of I guess that would be in the strategic plan, and that was to acknowledge that we didn't meet our current targets, and that to lay out our plan and strategy for a renewable power supply.
So Alice, could I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
On that particular one, I think you guys are referring to the renewable energy policy that was established back in 2010.
Yes.
Is that what you're looking to have updated?
Is there someone who wants to speak directly to that? Who's, yeah, Brian, I think maybe it was your idea to begin with.
I didn't know it wasn't.
Oh.
I don't know where that came from.
Oh, okay.
I think I see our power supply portfolio as on track right now.
Okay.
We have a target set by Article 51 in 2017, and the light plant did a great job laying out how we do a renewable in town first approach, PPA with the RECs as a second, and then we do unbundled RECs, and we try to get to 100% by the 2030 deadline. So I think the only thing in the power supply that I feel we need to really discuss is the use of more nuclear in the portfolio, and the public perception of non-emitting and the confusion with that being renewables. People think that non-emitting is wind, solar, and hydro, but it also can be nuclear. And I think we can talk as a board about, what percentage do we want to be renewable energy and how much do we want to be non-emitting energy? And that's a good discussion topic. But that's all that I see. That's a detailed thing in the power supply. I think most of that's on track and we've been meeting our goals. So.
Thank you. That's a good clarification. I've taken out that goal item, put a placeholder in for language that we'll use for understanding the policy question that we're being asked to think about. And I think it's a good one. And I think that's one that we'll go back out to the community and get some input in regarding a portion of our power supply that is nuclear. Well, I think we're all in alignment that this is the year over the next several years to develop and implement an AMI multi-year rollout strategy. So we just heard our time frame for when we will have AMI rollout, and we just established our policy for those who choose to opt out. So I think we're on target on that one. I think we all agree that utility scale battery storage is key for this year, or at least the beginning of the conversation, that we want to see this in the next 2 years to have a plan in place for utility scale battery storage. And that's on us to make sure that we keep moving that conversation forward and have whatever conversations are inherent in that to help the light plant make the right decisions. We heard a presentation at the last meeting on our incentive programs, those things that we offer customers to incentivize behavior changes, whether it's heat pumps or buying electric vehicles. And I think it's that what was lacking in that was the scalability of what we do. And I think that one of the questions that it begs us to ask is, are we making the right investments in the right incentives to actually have an impact on our greenhouse gas emission reduction goals? And I don't think we've done that yet. So this would be performing a program evaluation, not of any single one incentive that's offered, but our entire incentive package to see whether they are driving us towards where we want to be. And if the answer is no, then we need to relook at the incentives that we offer to get to the goals that we have established in Article 51. And the next item is a citizen engagement goal. And it's, we have on occasion gone out to public forum. We had I think the last big public forum was 2 years ago, and it was around the issue of AMI. But I think that we have an obligation to talk with our community about our power supply. And I think this gets back to Brian's comment about nuclear as being a community conversation, that perhaps our goal is once a year to have a more accessible discussion with the community about where we are in our sustainability planning, where we are in meeting Article 51 goals and the climate action plan goals. And maybe the conversation is held not just with us, but with the Climate Action Advisory Board together, presenting to the community where we are in meeting our town goals. The wire, complete a mile of undergrounding. There has been discussion on the board about how high up on our priority list we want to put moving forward with undergrounding. And the question I have to the board is this a high enough goal that we should include this in our goals for this coming year to establish what we'd like to see the light plant do in terms of advancing our undergrounding opportunities? Does anyone have a comment about how strongly they feel that this is a goal for this year? It's currently in there as an acknowledgement that we have an undergrounding policy. Wendy?
I don't think it's necessary to be a board goal. We already have an undergrounding policy in place, funds, and process that we go through. Having a goal is not necessarily going to change where we're going to end up. So for me personally, I don't think it needs to be in there. I don't think it's a board responsibility.
That's a good point. It may not be the board. It may not be a board responsibility. Wendy, you had a question.
So Alice, I know I had commented on this. I sort of agree having 1 mile should be a goal, but we have periodically had a conversation about the long-term strategy for undergrounding, and it is logistically underfunded. So there's a strategic question about whether the board wants to consider, maybe it's not this year, but really assess how practical it is and how far we're going to get in the original goal for undergrounding and how much funding. So there's limited funds to do it. And I don't know if the board feels strongly that it ought to be a higher priority from a funding perspective. So it's a different question. I don't know that it's a priority for this year, but it's an existing question we keep crossing.
So Wendy's point there, currently we collect 1.5% surcharge. By chapter 166, we could collect a total of 2%, but that's it. So we could increase funding a little bit. It's not going to make a huge difference in the whole. Currently, we get about $400,000 a year in collection, and it takes about $1 million to do 1 mile. So you're going to increase it a little bit, but it's not going to change a heck of a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And we originally didn't do 2% to fund CARES, right? Was that the trade-off?
We originally had 2%, but in 2009, we changed it down to 1.5%, and then 0.5% for CARES.
Okay.
That's when the power supply costs went up, if you recall.
Yeah.
Constellation deal. So the revenue didn't change much on the underground collection, and we were able to fund CARES that way.
Okay. So I think you're right. It's not a goal for the board to have a goal of completing 1 mile of undergrounding this year. And I think we know that last year, a lot of your effort, Dave, on the CMLP was in the construction of the Cambridge Turnpike project, which is all undergrounded. And that was a massive endeavor. I know that. So we are advancing our goals, but just probably not at the pace that some folks would want it. Is it okay to take that goal out as a goal for the board? I
think it is, but when we do rates at the end of the year, again, we should evaluate this funding.
Okay, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I'm keeping your comment in. I have your comments in the side, Wendy, and I think it addresses that, and I'll keep the comment so that we can go back to it. Thank you. Did I hear somebody ask a question?
Yeah.
Gordon.
Thanks for that, Wendy. I'm just not sure that basically the arc of this program is it's a 100-year project, right? Because we got about 100 lines. Okay, Dave, how many miles left do we have?
So we're a little over 50% converted. 30 miles of that were private residential developments that are required to go underground when they're built. The other 20 miles is what we converted. When the whole program was launched, the 100 miles that you're referring to was 1 year a mile. So you're accurate with that, but the data that people didn't know how long it was going to take. They didn't factor in the revenue collection, the surcharge, all of that. So, you know, it takes over 3 years to do 1 mile. And that's if you're really hitting every target and you have no interruptions. So in reality, you know, if you have 50 miles left, you have longer than 50 years, much longer.
Right. And so all I'm trying to say is, and we don't have to tackle this year. Heck, we've got 50 years left to think about it. But it's like, is this the right way to actually be envisioning this project? Is there any way that we can put some bounds on it and get most of the benefit out of it in the least amount of time and then call it a day? That kind of thing. Because I'm just not sure that, you know, I said earlier today that it's a small organization. We're asking you guys to do a lot. Every single one of these additional responsibilities adds to the costs. And so I'm just trying to keep a kind of a skeptical and critical eye on this. I totally support undergrounding. It's aesthetically pleasing and it has, resilience attributes too. So, you know, I understand that part too, but I'm also trying to be realistic. So we don't have to solve this now either. That's the reason why I suggested putting this on the goals. It's not urgent either. So, whatever.
So if we're going to have a goal, if the light board was going to have a goal on undergrounding, I would think it would be more around surcharge and the rate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Because everything else is operational and that's not really part of the light board's jurisdiction.
Right. I think that's a good. Okay. So I've just revised this a little bit and know that we'll come back to it. Thank you for that conversation. The ZNE middle school project. This board hasn't talked at all about the school project. There certainly is a role for the light plant to play in and I know they sit on one of the committees, maybe the building committee or the sustainability committee or one of the committees of the school construction project. And I just thought this board should be aware of and make any decisions that we are called upon to think about the ZNE opportunities at the middle school, because it fits with all the rest of the goals that we have for sustainability, meeting Article 51, our climate action plan, and Envision Concord. So I think it's a conversation that we ought to have on the table. I know that the school committee team has been holding public forums, public meetings throughout town. I think I personally attended 2 of them. And this board has not heard any yet. And I think it's probably, we should stay on top of what's happening. There was discussion about a PPA for a solar field at the school. So I think there are places where the board will have a role to play and we should be offering our thoughts on the sustainability aspects of the project that are in keeping with the CMLP goals. Financing is always a big question. How do we incentivize our residents to either do better or more weatherization, energy efficiency programs and other? So the question of financing comes up, like what is, we have had a CARES budget. We now have operationalized the CARES budget into our operating budget. And I think we need to figure out, are we offering the right incentives? I think this may fall under that question above about incentivizing, but on-bill financing is something that was proposed. And I think we need to understand, can the light plant, or what are the constraints for the light plant to offer on-bill financing that will help customers once they've had an energy audit to fund whatever the audit is suggesting they do. And what the role of the light plant is in that. So that's a policy question as well as an implementation strategy, but one that will help us advance toward our goals. One of the goals that has come up was about the process for training new board members. And I think it's a good item for us to have on the board. And we talk about, one of the thoughts that I think was emailed was the need to have a briefing book, basically, of the key things you need to know to be on the board to help jumpstart a new board member. The learning curve, as we know, is quite high in becoming a board member for the light plant. and that we have an opportunity to start putting it together, a compendium of the documents that are most, like, I think the NIPA memo is a good example that can go into a briefing book for new board members to be able to have at their resource, at their fingertips. So the item on here is, what were the things that we as board members would have liked to have known when we started working on this board, and keep a compendium of those documents available and pass it on to all new members. And the last one is one that came directly from the select board goals. I don't personally understand it. Maybe Dave does. The select board said they are reviewing the town's wireless communications plan. But because we do wireless communications, I thought that was something that we ought to know about. It's a select board goal, and I personally don't know what that goal entails. So it's on this as a goal statement, because if somebody else like the select board is thinking about this, then we ought to have a thought process that goes with it as well. And a question was raised by a board member about whether we want to prioritize through rates customers who require uninterrupted internet services for health and business purposes, for example. So once we understand what the select board's goal statement is for this year and how we relate to it, there's a question about should we look at a tiered structure that provides some customers with a different level of access to electricity or wireless services.
Alice, Terry has her hand up. She might be able to answer your question.
Oh, great. Thank you for seeing that. Terry.
Yes, I think I can shed a little bit of light on, maybe Stephen can add to it. I think this item refers to two different problems that are happening in town. One is the problem with cellular communications, or the lack of availability of it in the center of town and some other areas. And the second one is some citizens have requested that the board study the 5G and maybe create a policy for that. So these are items that we will be on our future agenda at some point.
Okay.
And I see Brian's hand up, and I don't know a whole lot about any of these topics, so just say that's what I think they are, and Stephen can probably clarify.
Okay. Thank you, Terry. So I put it on as our goals just because it was on the select board goals, and it's something that the board, or because we provide broadband services, that I was thinking that there may be a nexus to something that the board is going to have to be thinking about. Brian, you had a hand raised.
Yeah, I think this review the town's wireless communication plan, I think we can remove this from the board's goals. We just adopted the opt-out strategy, or the opt-out form, and I don't see how this is relevant to the utility.
It may not be. I put it in there only because it was a select board goal, thinking that we ought to know something about it, isn't there? But maybe it's just about cell coverage.
There is a strategic threat to our broadband business in 5G if that actually gets rolled out. So I don't know if I don't know how that the board can respond to that, but it is something looming on the horizon.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. So I think understanding what from Terry's input onto wireless communications being mostly a cell coverage issue, maybe we don't need to have this on the board. I have it as a board goal. I can see deleting that as well.
Alice?
Yeah.
It's Stephen. Yeah, I don't know that it relates back to 5G. That's something that we've heard from residents on, that the board is considering talking about in the future agenda. I think there's just so much unknown, and I think a previous commenter talking about the FCC is engaged in discussions, and obviously those types of decisions are, from the top down to the municipal. That comes from the federal government down to the municipalities and MLPs. The only thing I think that the board should consider, that the light board should consider, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a goal, is we are looking at what are our options for constructing a telecommunications facility, a tower, And would the light plant and or broadband enterprises be involved in that? And at this time, I'm thinking they probably will be. And one of the reasons for that is there's a tremendous sensitivity about what this facility would look like, which is one of the issues that came up last time. And if the utility constructs it, the profitability pressure isn't as great as if, say, a private carrier or a private tower company built it. And that enables us to be a little more, to spend more basically on the appearance of it than a private carrier would normally do. And so that's why we're looking at it in terms of an internal project. Again, whether or not that should be on this board's set of goals, I don't know, but I will just share with you that that's something that is my goal, and and one of the things that I put forward to the board is something that we're actively working on.
Thank you for the clarification. I'm not sure whether it belongs as a goal for us at this point. It may become one.
Yeah, I think it's going to be something. So sorry, Alice. I think it's going to be something that we will. It's just, and unfortunately, this is one of those things that it's, a step forward, a step back.
Yeah.
Have a discussion about it. I think we're moving forward, and then snowstorm, vaccination. Pick the crisis du jour that kind of puts it aside. But it is something that is on maybe the middle burner for me. And so if the board would want to defer on establishing it as a goal and reserve the right to review the progress and maybe, recommend some goals or suggest some directions on it at, future meetings, that's perfectly fine with me. And the other thing is I have been listening the whole time, and you guys have had a great meeting so far. Really, it's been a great discussion.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. Glad you could join us. I think that my next to do is to take the comments that we heard today, edit the goals as we've stated them with your input. I'll send it back out to the board, and perhaps we can vote next meeting. I see two hands up, from Brian first, then Gordon.
So I wanted to make comments on the vision statement reworking, and also the lack of time of use being our rate discussion as one of our high level goals.
Time of use is in here.
No, it's underneath AMI in the draft that you sent us, but you didn't even mention it as we went through the list of goals.
I was more being mindful of the time. It's now 9:28. We were ending, I'm hoping to end by 9:30. It's definitely in there. I understand that you have a lot that you want to talk about on time of use rates, and we've talked about having a presentation that you can make to the board on time of use rates, and perhaps even having a special meeting. But I think
you go back to the minutes we just reviewed, and Wendy is stated in the November meeting that we need to commit ourselves as a board to figuring out time of use.
I agree.
And I feel that's a higher level goal than being buried in a one line underneath the AMI project.
Okay, so you want to pull it out as a separate goal? Fine, we can have that.
It's going to take multiple meetings.
We can take that out and put it as a separate goal. It's just it's an editing question of where it fits, and then we can easily pull that out as a discussion of time of use rates as a goal.
I gave you 5 bullets underneath that as well. So
I saw the 5 bullets. Those are part of our conversation, but those were not goals from what I could see. I don't want to get into a deep discussion here. Those were items to be discussed underneath time of use rates. The conversation is understanding time of use rates so that we can make informed decisions for our rate setting going forward. And all of your bullets are part of the conversation about what we need to understand and work towards. The big goal statement is for us to understand time of use rates and how they apply to us moving forward. Gordon, you had a question.
Just quickly.
We should probably think about ending if we can.
Okay, sure. Just quickly, in the vision statement, I think that there's room. I'm not sure how the wording would go, but there's some room in there about the value that's expressed in our affordable low income tariff. Where we provide rate assistance. So
Yeah,
this is a community value that is part of our vision. And the other thing is just, and this is a future project that may not start this year, but I think that there's an idea that a higher priority service, something, if there's and we actually do recognize homes that where they can, the resident can notify the light plant that they've got life safety equipment in their facility, in their residence, and that would preferably prioritize restoration of service to those houses. Maybe there's something more we can do along the lines of providing technical assistance, batteries, whatever, in order to actually help a person that's at risk of losing power in a way that we currently don't. But that's a really blue sky thing. We haven't really done any thinking about that. And maybe it intersects with something we're already doing already, but I just wanted to suggest that.
In the vision statement, I went back to the long range plan and to your comments about affordable housing and, making sure that we support the, low income and diversity and so forth. And I had put in some edits suggesting that we mention that we're trying to uphold our traditions and our historic charm within the vision statement for the light plant, because that is part of what we do while we make changes to address the current issues of climate change and others. So I think that's right. I think we need to make the statement inclusive of town values.
and you think those town values are not captured in the Envision Concord, Article 51?
Well, this is the vision statement that you
Yeah.
asked at the beginning.
Yep.
So the vision statement doesn't mention Article 51 specifically in.
No, it says
the
climate
proposed.
sustainability and resilience goals.
Right. So I just wanted to uphold our town traditions and historic charm.
Okay.
Because a lot of people think when they think sustainability, they think everybody's going to have panels on their house and we're going to look like some modern utopia.
Okay.
I want to make sure people know it's not going to be upending.
Okay. I think you had that in your in what you submitted last night, so I didn't
Yeah.
get a chance to think about how to
He
include it.
used the
I'll
word
do that.
Did he use the word traditions?
I'm sorry, what was that question, Pam?
The word traditions.
Yeah.
I'd like to take a look at that. I mean, I'm not sure I want to uphold our traditions always.
So what I think I will do is take the comments that I received but didn't have a chance to incorporate after receiving them yesterday, send it all back out to the board to review and take your input, and hopefully we can vote on our board goals at the next meeting. Does that sound like a reasonable approach? I've taken out some items. I've noted them in the draft that I have. I'll take some of the comments that I got. I have to be honest, I didn't get a chance to fully incorporate all of Brian's comments when he submitted them yesterday. So I will do as best I can and send it back out to the board for further comments and a vote for the following meeting.
Thank you for this, Alice.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
It is now 9:34. We are beyond time. I can't keep us on track. I've tried.
You did pretty good today.
Not good enough. Is there anything else we need to discuss before we entertain a motion to adjourn? Are there liaison reports? Are there public comments that were not offered during the time of when
We
I
do
offered
have
them?
2 hands up from the public.
Okay.
Alice, I
Let's
probably added those 4 minutes, so I'm sorry.
see. Oh, yeah, it's your fault. Thanks. You're not invited to this meeting anymore. There are 3 hands raised. Let's see if we can have new comments. Start on the top. David Allen.
They're unmuted. On the select board's focus on wireless in town and 5G as a competitive threat, actually as a competitive opportunity for those who, certainly myself, have spent their lives in, we used to call it telecoms. You don't think about wired and wireless except together. In fact, if you go back to the origins of the town's fiber to the home service, speaking as the guilty party here, frankly, 20 years back, as we look across that history, multiple times we have considered alongside the fiber to the home system, setting up, for instance, a townwide Wi-Fi. Well, on the horizon today is 5G, but before we get there, let's address the question of who's responsible here. If you look around town, who's going to do this? Who's going to take this matter on? If it's not the light plant board, now that we do have a fiber to the home system, it's quite clearly going to be not just the light plant board, but light plant. The 5G gets to very interesting questions. Real 5G is a tower every few blocks in town, not a large tower, but a tower nonetheless. And all the implications that carry along with that, citing the thing, permissions, neighbors' concerns, negotiating the arrangement, but also the extraordinary advantages that you get with that. And the way that, yes, it perhaps substitutes for the fiber, or maybe it doesn't. I hope it becomes clear that this sits at your doorstep, and you're invited to take the responsibility that clearly is you're being asked to take here. Is this a simple discussion? Not vaguely. Do you need to get serious about it? Damn sure. Do you need appropriate resources? Absolutely. But the town needs to be thinking about this. And as I said, you look around, I could put it in the negative, but let me put it in the positive. The light plant is the place because it now has an installed fiber to the home system, which it's operated for a half dozen years very successfully. The light plant is the place where these questions about wireless need to nest. And I would certainly look forward to your executing that forward.
Thank you, David. Good points. Sheldon Hines.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, Sheldon Hines, 74 The Valley Road. First of all, I want to second what David just said. Under FCC regulations, a wireless carrier for 5G could actually co-opt your fiber optic system and demand to be on it. 5G works best when it's integrated with a fiber optic cable. And since the town already has it running through the town, you need to be aware that you can have your system taken over by a carrier for that purpose. And so that it's extremely relevant to you, and you need to be boning up on that. Second of all, I want to point out that I have been trying for more than a year to get the light plant management to recognize that the FCC has regulations related to the placement of its existing wireless meters, and that there's a requirement to have a certificate from the vendor of the meters and inform the end user of the requirement to keep at least an 8-inch barrier between where the meter is located and where someone lives. There are probably more than 100 people in town whose bed rests against the side of the house where the meter is located, and when they're sleeping, they may be less than 8 inches from the meter itself. That is so I gave to everybody here, in effect, through various emails, the information needed. And if you look at the example certificate that was provided on a Texas Instrument device, you'll see that informing the end user of the need to maintain that separation is required by regulation. And as far as I know, you do not possess the certificate that's requested there, and you've not informed people that they should not be putting their beds close to where the meter is located on the other side of the wall. These are facts. This is not my opinion. And the FCC does recognize that there are dangers from wireless radiation. It's just that the thresholds that they use to consider what's dangerous are 25 years out of date. But the 8 inches mentioned is based upon the heating concept that radiation causes heat and can damage people. And so there's responsibility which hasn't been met here, and it's important that you do it. And it's a town responsibility. The town's attorney should be involved, and a consultant needs to be brought in, even if it's a consultant from the vendor of your meters. Thank you very much. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Sheldon. I think we also have a memo to that regard that was forwarded from him. Frank Breen, last comment. Hello, Frank.
Hello, okay.
Yep, we can hear you. Thank you.
Frank Green, Phillip Farm Road. My question was about coverage, broadband coverage. We don't have it in this neighborhood, Phillip Farm Road and Kenny Lane, and a lot of the area out here in, kind of the Hanscom area. The question is, like, when are we going to get it, or not, or what? I think the problem is that we have underground utilities mandated by the town when the houses were built. So I'm wondering when we'll ever get access to broadband, which I think.
So there's about 5% of the town that's in the same scenario that Phillip Farm and Kenny Lane are in, where it's underground. It was put in a number of years ago. There's no conduits. So right now we don't have a timetable for those areas. Doing the conduit installation and fiber backbone is expensive, and the payback would be very difficult. So it's something that we have to look at, but it is a big issue, and we're aware of it.
All right, I see
no answer, right? I guess that's the.
Yeah, we don't have a timetable right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all. I think we have heard from our citizens and who are in attendance. Are any final comments from the board before I entertain a motion to adjourn? Okay, I'll take that motion.
So motioned.
Do I have a second? Brian seconds. Roll call vote. I'll start around my screen again. I don't know why people shift on my screen. Brian, you're first this time. I can't hear you.
They shift from the raising hand function.
Thank you.
Yeah, but yes, I agree. Let's close the meeting.
Pam.
Yes.
Wendy.
Yes.
Gordon.
Yes.
Alice. Yes, it is unanimous. Our meeting has now ended. Thank you all. You'll be hearing from me in the course of time here. Thanks all.
Take
care.
Thank you.